Hello everybody and welcome. This is the Midnight McBride Show, and this week on the show I've got a special guest, and we're going to have a slight change to the format this week. So we're going to start off with a video clip, and then you'll all know who my guest is. And we'll start with this clip.
Right now, the level of crisis that we're in is personal lifestyle choices aren't enough to make the difference that we need to see. We need systematic legislative change from the highest levels down, and only this can bring about the change that we need fast enough. So this is why I am hopefully in a few hours going to climb up the side of Big Ben to put an Extinction Rebellion banner on the side of it, because we're a social ape, and attention is a currency, and we need to get the attention of the public and the government on these most serious of topics, because currently we humans are the 6th mass extinction event of the planet.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think you might have guessed who my guest is now. And welcome onto the show, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
You're welcome. And it's midnight. It takes everybody a few goes to get that. So we've called this show Big Ben. Obviously, I thought there was a bit of a pun in there, but Ben Atkinson, you recently climbed Big Ben.
Big hands.
Yeah. And it was to do with, you were doing it for a very good reason, and it was to do with Extinction Rebellion. Have I said that correctly?
You have.
Thank you. Good.
Or known amongst ourselves as XR. It might be easier.
XR. We'll go with XR. This show, we've got a lot to talk about. There's lots of content. I know that you arrived here today, and over the last few days, you've sent me some information so that I can be prepped for the show, so I have an idea of what you're all about. I had an idea, but not fully. I have never had as much content. Literally, I've never had as much content. So this is going to be good. This is going to be interesting. Also, you turned up today with nothing on your feet.
I did.
Yeah. It reminds me of The Hobbit, where they all walk around with nothing on the feet, don't they, you know?
That's
and
pretty
barefoot.
much what it's like.
Yeah, yeah. So I understand now why you climb Big Ben and how that came about, because you climb anyway, which is one of the many topics we're going to cover today. And I also want to talk about your life, because your journey into this present moment is very interesting also, and there's aspects of that I didn't find out until this morning as well. But we're going to start at the beginning. So first of all, before we go into your life journey, we'll talk about Extinction Rebellion. Now, what is it?
Extinction Rebellion is a kind of community grassroots organisation that is got 3 aims: to get the government to tell the truth about the climate crisis that we're in, to declare a climate emergency, and to set up a citizens' assembly to take the response to climate change out of the deadlock of party politics. And we
by whatever means necessary.
Not whatever means. We are a avowed non-violent political organisation.
Let me rephrase that then. By certain means that might be controversial.
Yes. The climate crisis isn't new. Our awareness of the climate crisis isn't new.
No.
I learnt about sort of man-made climate change about when I was 8 years old. in the Osborne Book of Science. I read about it.
Right.
Since then, I've studied it at every stage of my career or academic career, all the way up through university. And the politics of climate change have been very frustrating to observe. It's such a long-term, slow-motion car crash that we're in as a species on a planet that we're too distracted by things that are closer. Consequences a year down the line are hard to work towards, let alone 10 years. 10 years in politics is like an age, let alone consequences that are half a century away. It's hard for us to cognitively digest that and to emotionally take it as serious.
I talk about that kind of time span where governments might have, the Official Secret Acts, or I think it was in Dunblane where they wanted to suppress certain facts and keep things down to protect the families and things. But the Official Secrets Act is generally, I can't remember, I think they can extend it now, but it was 50 years. I think they could do 75 years. It's to take certain aspects and things out of your lifespan. And it's hard for us to grasp that kind of time period, because I always say that if you look back 50 years ago and look what we were doing then, it seems insane. Let's go back a bit further, a couple of hundred years ago, and they had slavery. And you think, if that happened now, I would never be part of that. But we look back and that's easy. But then every 50 years that passes, whether it's apartheid, slavery, go back further, burning witches, at the time, we don't see it. We only ever see it afterwards with hindsight. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing now is a question I asked a lot when I was doing meditation workshops. What are we doing now that in 50 years people will look back and go, I would never have gone along with that if I was alive then, or I was around then. So as human beings, trying to grasp that time scale, trying to grasp time that's either decades or even beyond our own lifetime is very difficult.
It is. Yeah. To answer the question, in 50 years' time, what are we going to be doing?
Yeah,
it's like, for me,
it's eating animals now is the main thing.
That's a big one. I mean, I'm not vegan. I have vegan sympathies.
I am the same. I was vegetarian, then I was vegan, and I now have meat occasionally, not often. And although it goes against my beliefs, so I struggle with it a bit.
Yeah, well, I scrape up deer off the roads in the Lake District where I'm from. Yeah, roadkill. And I will happily buy meat with a yellow sticker on it that's going to get chucked out and waste. I hate waste.
I'm the same.
So it's great. I think we're omnivores and opportunists, and nutritionally, my core principle is resilience. People that I live with are always thinking, the best before date's coming up. Best stick that on Ben's shelf because Ben will eat it, and it's.
See, I'm exactly the same. Willow will have stuff in the fridge, and she'll say, "Are you going to eat this or not?" I said, "Well, what's the date on it?" She'll say, "Well, it's 2 days over now." I said, "No, it's a week on that. Yeah, leave it alone." And it drives her crazy because I won't let her throw anything out.
Smell it, taste it. Like
if it hasn't gone off, I'll eat it.
We know it. Yeah, it's like you look at dogs; they eat crap off the ground day in, day out, and they just build up a resilience to it. So but the immune system's like, if you don't use it, you don't have one. So I think controlled exposure is important.
And with food as well, I think you'll find there's obviously a vested interest by the people that are manufacturing it to have that period where it's edible for a short period of time, so that some goes to waste, that we buy more.
It's almost like designed obsolescence into food.
Planned obsolescence, I talk about that a lot as well. Yeah, exactly. There's a great programme. I manage the television I watch very carefully. I don't watch very much, but there was a programme called The Men Who Make Us Spend, a BBC documentary. It was a 3-part thing, and it was all about planned obsolescence and the world of PR and marketing and what they sell us and things that are designed to break and not last very long, basically. And it was fascinating. And you wouldn't believe the tricks they play,
Oh yeah. And I mean, my mum's from the east coast of Canada, a small island called Newfoundland, and it. Up until like the last decade or so, it still had. Do
you mean Newfoundland, or is it just the way? Is that just the way you say it? Newfoundland.
Newfoundland
Newfoundland.
Like understand. That is the way you say it.
Right.
My mum gets very particular about this. But there was there's much more of a pioneering kind of spirit out there, because you saw the weather they've had recently. It made the the news. They were having snow up past the first floor, and people are opening their doors and they're not getting out. So they have climate emergencies like all the time. Anyway, it's a hard place to live. Very beautiful.
Yeah.
It
is very beautiful.
She's kind of got that hoarder mentality going on, where even though now she's living in England, she's got like freezers full of food. Like if there's going to be a zombie apocalypse, you want to be at my mum's house.
There you go. So I'm going to pull us back to Extinction Rebellion. And so recently, one of the events that you did, a stage, was you climbed Big Ben. And you did it dressed, am I correct, as Boris Johnson?
That's right, yeah.
Yes, with a wig on and so on.
There was like a dual purpose to that.
Yeah.
One was I didn't want to get shot. And I'd done a bit of research, and I'd looked at the Fathers for Justice people and read an account of the armed police and that were at Buckingham Palace. And they sort of said they had this moment where they're trained to stop intruders.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we shoot this guy? And it's like, we're not going to shoot him because it's Batman. And it's like, oh, I thought I can learn off that. It's like, so make myself look ridiculous.
Because they don't take you as a serious threat then, as in risking lives. You might be making a political statement, but you're not going to kill anybody. You're not a terrorist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm even cautious about causing distress. I don't want to cause distress to anyone. And Extinction Rebellion is being provocative. It's deliberately being provocative, because the normal avenues of protest haven't been effective. So we're trying to be creative to meet the issues at hand.
Is it okay to say that, I know you don't want to cause distress and stuff, but you cause humour? Because I saw the clip, obviously, you're climbing up there as Boris Johnson, and although you have a very serious message, at the same time, it made me smile.
Well, yeah, it was like a fluorescent green jumpsuit just to draw attention to myself. Like, I was also clowning around. The archetype of the fool is very dear to my heart, where the fool punctures the ego of power and authority. And Boris Johnson right now is holding that position of the king, the sovereign. Even though he's just prime minister, he's holding the archetype of the king. And so I was playing the fool. And that's why I made a lot of my dialogue directed to him in person.
Yeah. It got a lot of media attention because the clip we showed at the beginning, you were interviewed by Sky News. You're on nearly every major news channel, in all the papers. And so
it even got on Fox News. Now, I have a little conceit that I hope Donald Trump was watching Fox News that night, and
he'll know.
He'll know. I hope he was sat there thinking, "That's not a Boris Johnson wig. That's a Donald Trump wig. He's stolen my limelight."
But so, would you judge that as being a successful?
Yes,
I would say so. If that's
okay.
your goal,
To speak frankly about Extinction Rebellion, it's a very young organisation, and it's a non-centralised organisation. Anybody that adheres to their tenets of non-violence and the directives that I mentioned earlier, people can self-organise, and that allows a very creative, fluid organisation. But at the same time, we're still learning, and we make mistakes along the way. Now, in my judgment, the Canning Town action, where people climbed on top of the trains there, that symbolically was wrong, because public transport is part of the solution. And we don't want to be just going out to grab media column inches, which we are deliberately trying to get attention to this subject. But we wouldn't go around smashing solar panels just to get attention. It's symbolically that would be wrong.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you live it. You're the first guest I've had here that came in an electric car. You know, you live it, don't you?
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not perfect.
No.
I'm still struggling with all sorts of issues like this. My grandma lives in Canada, and she's 97, and I had to make the decision: do I fly out to Canada with my son so he can meet his grandma before she dies?
Yeah.
It was a really morbid thought, and I took him out there, and it's like, fortunately, she's in good health and she's in great spirits.
Yeah.
So it's like I kind of relaxed a bit. She could be around for another 10 years. Great Uncle Bill only died at 105 just a few months ago.
Right,
So
you've got some good genes there. Then,
hardy
haven't you?
stock.
Yeah.
But so lifestyle choices are difficult in this increasing awareness around the climate issues, because it feels like we're not allowed to exist, because like our very presence on this planet as a species is the problem. There's so many of us, and our lifestyles are consuming so many resources.
Yeah, I say that we're the only sentient beings on this planet that go around and kill everything we come into contact with en masse.
Yeah.
We kill other animals, we kill each other, we're killing the planet. We are, by definition, if you were a scientist, you'd say that we were a virus, or something.
A parasite.
Yeah,
that great scene from The Matrix where Agent Smith is berating Neo for that, and it's.
But I think that comes from moving unconsciously as a species, and I think when we start to make good choices and move consciously, which is what you're doing, it doesn't have to be that way. Let's
just say we are a real clever fucking monkey, and we. There's no determined end game where we're not going to create our own extinction. We might do. It's a very definite possibility. I hope we don't. I mean, if you look at the Fermi paradox and the different barriers to development of a species, kind of into a sort of interstellar organism that communicates with other organisms or life forms out there, which there's no guarantee that there are. We could be completely unique in the universe. We might not be. But one of those is, can we coexist on the planet without killing ourselves?
Yeah. We're also the only sentient beings on this planet that aren't fully present and in the moment. All animals, everything else is following natural law. It's natural, and we overthink everything, create stress and tension and resistance, and we're all suffering as a species, mentally. You don't get too many horses or lions in the wild and things with mental health issues. The only animals that I've ever come across that experience mental health problems are either living with or have been very close contact with human beings.
Well, I mean, humans are a fascinating species. We self-domesticated ourselves before we ever domesticated the species around us. But cognitively, we can only ever exist in the moment. But you and I both know that we can get caught into memory, which is our avenue to the past.
Yeah.
But the way that we exist in the future is through forecasting, and we if you split that forecasting into hope and fear, what we hope for the future and what we fear of the future, and this forecasting is part of the way we navigate life.
I says, as human beings, most of us think of a future event. We have an anticipated or desired outcome. We'll think of 100 things that can go wrong, and even in worst case scenario, only one of them can come true. And quite often, things will go well. So all that energy, all that suffering, all that negative, those thought patterns that we've been conditioned with as children growing up, and quite often it can be debilitating. And as human beings, it'll prevent all courses of action. We won't do anything because we're living in fear.
Well, this is part of the problem with the climate crisis, and the sixth mass extinction event that we're in the middle of creating, is that it's so far off that, insofar as it's 50 years away, before it really kicks in. I mean, it's happening now. People are losing their lives due to climate events now, but it doesn't seem immediately pressing. It's like, do you have a mortgage? Do you have payments on card to meet?
No.
Do you have a partner who has an emotional presence in your life? These are going to be a lot more concerning to you than, oh my God, are my kids going to have like surpluses of food?
Yeah, because there's that much noise in front of us, that much to think about, that many daily struggles.
Mm-hmm.
We struggle to look forward and make decisions based on our direction as a species, because we're so sucked into this, this material world that surrounds us at the minute, Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before attention. Where's our attention at? And it's like, is it on our kind of social media streams? Is it in the people in our community? Are we thinking about what we're eating next week? Are we going to a food bank? Have we got bank loans? It's like trying to get the attention on this huge cliff edge that we seem to be driving towards is difficult.
I say that you have to be very careful what you put in here, because whatever we focus on, we feed and move towards it. Yeah. Whatever we focus on, we feed and move towards it. And if you drive a car down the motorway and you look at your window and you look over there, you will drift towards it. This steers us. So whatever you put your attention on, you're going to approach it, and you're going to give it your energy and feed it. So it's really important that we put the right things in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always hated horror films for that very reason. It's like, I don't want it in my head.
No. So Ben, what we haven't done now, we've talked a bit about Extinction Rebellion, which we could talk about probably for 3 or 4 hours, because of the theories and the ideologies behind it and everything. It's fascinating. But we'll talk a bit about your journey. So, Ben, where are you from initially? Where were you born?
I was born in Kings Lynn, Norfolk. Moved about a bit. My dad's work, in the corporate world, necessitated moving to follow his promotions and movement. Yeah. He's being headhunted by different organisations, so dotted around the south a few times, and then settled up in Nottingham. About the age of 13.
I know that we talked about, let me get this right, evangelical parts of your childhood where you were brought up. Christ and the church was heavily involved in your upbringing.
I wasn't brought up a Christian. I kind of, in Cuckfield, down in Sussex, it was a small village, and my parents are nominally Christian, and they took us to the local church.
Right.
And I got Christian messages through children's church and things like this, but like most people, they're just there in the background, not that dissimilar to the Christmas story or the Easter bunny. But when I moved up to Nottingham, it was from a comprehensive school to quite an imposing all-boys private school. And it was like, ooh, okay. And it was a very much more intense atmosphere, this...
Yeah. Well, all the women have gone.
All the women have gone. This hierarchy of boys already in established groups, and it was intimidating. I mean, it was a hard move, I think, for everyone in the family. My mum lost her connections to her community. My dad was trying to make a new job work. He was working for Speedo at the time in Nottingham, and I was lonely. And my family was fairly emotionally austere. They from boarding school backgrounds. So I encountered, when I bumped into the Christian Union at school, a bunch of really huggy, friendly people. And there was girls too. It was joint.
Now we understand.
Well, it was joint with the girls' school next door.
Yeah.
So it's there was lots of pluses, as well as it tying into this this background history that I'd been given in children's church, and it was all right, this has got meaning. This is wow, okay. And so I fell hook, line, and sinker into it for emotional reasons. For about it was about a 5-year journey into. Alice Goes Down the Looking Glass, and eventually it was my sort of love of science and philosophy and truth that led me out of it, because it's hard to hold on to a creationist view of the world being 7,000 years old when you got a passion for biology, evolution, geology, and it's fitting these different like modalities together, and it eventually it broke down, and
it's going to, I think, though.
And so that kind of set up a lifelong pursuit of truth, which sounds very grandiose, but it's just like, I like to know what's going on. Like we're as a species, we love to control and manipulate our environment around us, and it's like that gives us emotional security. So I was just trying to find my place in the world and sort of work out what was right. At one point, I thought the Bible was the spoken word of God, and that if I didn't maximize my converts, I wasn't going to get to heaven. But that fell apart, and slowly kind of, as I investigated science, psychology, philosophy, and like looked into the world religions, and it was like, right, okay, there seems to be this thing that would like we look more like a monkey than a mouse. It's like, okay, so suddenly anthropology becomes really interesting. It's like, what are we? Like, who am I that's thinking these things, and what's good for me to do? And so these are kind of questions that have engaged people down through the centuries.
As you're going along your journey, you mentioned you've been in the military as well.
Yeah.
Tell us maybe a little bit about that.
Okay, so when I lost my faith around the age of 19, I didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted to be a lay preacher up to that point, and then suddenly the only kind of purpose in my life had evaporated. Before, it's like, what's right to do? What should I do with my life? It looks like I've only got one life. It's like as soon as this arrangement of molecules and it's like it's like dissolves. It's like, I hope there's an afterlife, but I don't know there's an afterlife. It's like, what should I do? And I kind of thought, I want to try and understand as much of this as I can. So I just went around collecting diverse experiences, and I kind of thought, shits and giggles, let's join the military. That's going to be exciting, isn't it?
I've heard some motivations for joining before, but never that one.
Well,
I like that, though. Going through life just wanting to experience diverse situations and experiences. Experiencing life, feeling.
The Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem, suck the marrow out of life. And it's like, I don't want to go along and just take other people's narratives. I mean, one of the ways that our brains
question everything. Question everything.
And but it's like that our brains work around stories, around narratives, and it's like there's all these different narratives out there. How do we know which one's right? Like what is truth? And it's like I just see science as a story. It's a beautiful, multi-generational, kind of very rational story that people have been adding to for centuries. But it's just a story. It's always being refined and sort of brought down. There's no absolute truth in science, but it's all the waves are breaking in the same direction on the shores of truth. And it's like it excites me, but it's like science isn't the only narrative out there.
No.
So it's trying to like bring all these narratives together has been, and integrate them into a simpler expression that I can find is kind of, that's been, at one point I thought, I'm going to be a writer, but it's like I haven't got the patience and discipline to sit down and write.
It's tough.
Like, isn't it? So I'm just kind of working on being a gobshite right now.
Okay. So there's a reason with Extinction Rebellion. You climbed because you do a lot of climbing. And that's why you probably arrived here barefoot today as well. You don't generally wear footwear unless it's, it's necessary. So we'd maybe talk about then, let me get this right, it's the Happy Ape, is that right?
Happy Naked Ape.
Yeah. And that encompasses a whole array of other topics that we're going to talk about. But maybe start with that, the Happy Naked Ape.
Right, okay. So Desmond Morris had a seminal book out.
Yep.
Naked Ape.
That's right.
We are the naked ape. Like if you look at us, we're a primate. That's our closest living kind of relatives, the bonobo, the pygmy chimp of the Congo. And we've got various kind of adaptations from there. We're kind of like walking upright most of the time. Our feet don't like a prehensile grip like they used to when we were an arboreal ape. We've lost our hair. We've got noses. We kind of like we mate like generally facing each other rather than doing it doggy doggy. Hey, we'd like a bit of that too, but most terrestrial land mammals don't. They all do it doggy doggy. It was like, why? Why are these differences?
Thought about that.
It's like, well, David Attenborough's got a great radio documentary called The Waterside Ape.
That's right, yeah.
Check it out. It kind of comes from the aquatic ape hypothesis, which for a long time was considered pseudoscience, but now we're at a place in like it's quite exciting in a way. It's a very slow exciting in the scientific world, but there's a paradigm shift from the savanna model that's and we're slowly moving over to the aquatic ape hypothesis, where we're descended from the apes that came down from the trees and started to access the aquatic proteins along the kind of like the shores of the lakes and the seas, the mussels, the catfish, the different things like this. And at first there was no evidence for this, so it was unverifiable. But now the evidence is slowly coming out, and you can see the marks on the bones of catfish where our ancestors were making those filleting marks, exactly the same as modern day fishmongers do. They've got the middens of mollusks that we're feeding on, and all of this helped this rich abundance of food helped the brain develop. It gave us lots of time on our hands because there's so much aquatic protein readily available as soon as you work out it's there, that these clever monkeys had lots of spare time on their hands. And they Darwin's theory of evolution, people often think survival of the fittest, but as soon as you've got rid of survival, because there's lots of food, it's not survival that makes the difference. It's like who gets to mate. And this is kind of the best theory of brain development that we've come across, is that it's a product of sexual selection, and that we kind of set up an organic breeding program just by our behavior and our nature as like these hypersexual bonobo kind of common ancestor, that then led to us as a species, hominids, kind of having this huge increase in brain size because women like intelligent, witty men. And it's like, so it created this this selective breeding program, and out of nowhere, suddenly this emergent species with huge cognitive abilities arose from nowhere, and it's taken over the world.
Well, it's the frontal lobe, isn't it? The frontal cortex, I think, that if you go through history, it sort of just appeared overnight.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden we became hyper intelligent compared to, you know, the step before.
There's a great book called *Sapiens*. You might have read it or not, but like he describes us. The author describes us as a very middle class omnivorous primate from Central Africa. And how did we go from this middle class omnivorous ape to masters of the world?
See, stages in evolution, usually when they're mapped, it can take hundreds of thousands of years, if sometimes, you know, millions of years, but hundreds of thousands of years certainly for us, you know, once we started walking upright. And what they've found is that this frontal lobe, the frontal cortex, had appeared, which is what gave us our ability to think the way we do now, and language and lots of other things. When this appeared, they can't understand how it appeared overnight. There's no gradual process. It just appeared.
Well, look up The Mating Mind by Geoffrey Miller, I think it is. It talks about this, the idea of sexual selection being the very process that caused consciousness to emerge at this level so quickly. I mean, if you look at what we've done to dogs within a space of a few thousand years, we can even less than that, over a handful of generations, by selective breeding, we can create such myriad genomic expressions as the pug, vile breeding creations that these are. They're absolutely disabled in their inherent form. They can't breathe properly. Their eyes are bulging out. Their legs don't work. or you've got the collie, this super intelligent breed of dog. It's like you can see that the speed at which evolution works through selective breeding is a very viable process, and I don't know anything else that matches it.
No. So we met today, but we've been in touch, and we were introduced via Catherine, who's a good friend of mine. Willow's been on the show, and I think we're allowed to say now that you're engaged.
Yes.
Yes.
I very, very lucky man. She on the 29th of February, she tricked me into a tree, and up the tree she proposed to me.
Right, so she proposed to you.
Yeah. So it's 29th of February, isn't it?
Yeah. Of course, yes.
And so I've been married before. I've got a family, and it was painful. I was left for another man, and that forced me into a therapeutic journey. And it's so when she proposed, it was like there's a huge scab coming up. I hadn't realised how much sort of emotional scarring that was there, but it's beautiful. But
it's scary at first, isn't it? And then, but you've got to open up. If you want to love, you've got to let somebody in, and that's terrifying. Well, it certainly was for me.
She got right through my emotional armour, but it's hard. There's a tension between freedom and security, and I understand us to kind of be sort of sexual omnivores. We've got that history of being very promiscuous, like bonobos in our recent past, and yet we're kind of not allowed that free sexual expression in today's culture and in our lives. And like sex has become a commodity that's traded. It's in a way sex
sells, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that's what it does.
But it's been forced into our unconscious selves, which is then. It's very hard to be a man with a sense, and a woman, where women are slut shamed and men are. It's like we have these appetites, but we're not allowed. It's not okay to meet them. And it's like, so how can I meet my form honestly and sort of say it? Actually, I have a sexual appetite, and yet I'm in a committing relationship, and it's not allowed. I'm in this box. And yet, so lots of people work that out by being deceptive, and but at the same time, I hate deception.
That's
it's
a
like
terrible way forward, isn't it?
Against my desire for truth. So it's like,
if I lie to somebody, which I've done in the past when I was younger, and when I was younger, a lot younger, I've been unfaithful. I feel sick after the guilt, just the feeling. I could feel it in my stomach, and I can't live like that. You know what I mean? I have to be able to be honest. Anything else doesn't work for me, because, the feelings of anxiety and life's so much better. Sometimes it requires brutal honesty, and that can seem as being hard or cold, but it's actually the most loving thing you can do sometimes, is to tell somebody the bloody truth.
Well, yeah, I'm really interested in those hard conversations. It's like, because I don't want to go through life lying, but at the same time, lying to yourself is like, I'd be lying to myself if I said I didn't have a sexual appetite beyond monogamy. So it's like it creates a very interesting territory to then sort of have that honesty with yourself and then with your partner. And it's like, where do you go? And like there's all sorts of different ways that people can express this. Sometimes it's by avoiding the situation, but then you look at Catholic priests. Like, what happens when you completely reject your sexuality? It comes out sideways in horrific manners. So it's like, it's like, have the brave conversations.
I always said in the past that I'd rather somebody be brutally honest with me, and I might not like what they say, than to not know the truth, live in ignorance and bliss, but having no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
I'd rather know. I'd rather know. So when Catherine introduced me, told me about you, which is quite a while ago now. It's when Catherine first came on the radio, I think. She mentioned you because she thought you were an interesting guy, and maybe that you should come on the show. And she introduced you, or said, you need to speak to this guy, and she called you the tree guy. Yeah. And I think that's because you spend a lot of time up trees, and you've done a video about this, haven't you?
Yeah. It's called My Own Hands. It kind of the illusion to being in the reliance of my own hands, because it's all solo. There's no ropes. As a tree surgeon, I use ropes in a tree, but
so that's you actually work as a tree surgeon as well now.
I do work as a tree surgeon, but that kind of came after the fact. That's just because my wife like had a bad back and couldn't cope with me being a crisis care worker away on expeditions and things like this. So I changed work and became a tree surgeon, worked locally, just capitalizing on this skill that I had of climbing trees, because
I'd seen the video, and I was thinking he's going to fall, but you don't. You almost, the balance you have as you walk along a branch that's moving underneath you as well. I can only compare it to, say, Cirque du Soleil or something, where you actually, you seem to be very comfortable up there.
It's like the slackliners. They do amazing things up there. And how often do you see a squirrel fall, or an owl like fall out the sky? Or it's like, we are descended from our boreal apes. When my hand grabs around the branch, I know that my hand and that branch co-evolved for millions of years, and that's a good feeling. And it's like the way I was a kid, I climbed trees. Most kids do, but it was that move to Nottingham where there was this big like park behind the house that I lived, Willerton Park, where they filmed the Batman movie. It was Wayne Manor, but there were these huge like parkland trees, and I was lonely. It was a hard few years, kind of joining this big boys' school and sort of not fitting in, sort of feeling like the brunt of jokes about being a soft southerner, and everyone in Nottingham is such a hard northerner, even though they're from the Midlands. And it was a hard few years. My escape was walking the dog in the park and climbing these trees. And every time I went for a walk, I'd just push it a little bit further. I'd try and find that edge, because as soon as you find that edge and you feel the fear, then everything else, like any unhappiness, any loneliness,
disappears for a while.
Disappears, because you're in that state of flow, the hyper-focus, and it's beautiful.
See, I've experienced so many synchronicities today when we're talking, because I write about climbing trees, and I talked about it a lot. And I'll explain. And I wrote that I use this analogy a lot. As a child, I always use this analogy where, as a child, you think about climbing your tree, and doubt hasn't been invented yet. You think about something and you do the corresponding action and you do it. And because you're not overthinking it, as we do as adults, you climb the tree. As adults, if we're going to climb a tree, you're thinking, I might fall. I could break my nails. What if somebody sees up my skirt? Or what if I tear my clothes? Or all these thoughts will go through your head. You'll think of 100 things that can go wrong, and you'll not climb the tree. Now, also, as a child, when you think like that, the mind of a child, because you're not anxious when you're climbing the tree, because you don't know that it's going to go wrong, because you believe it's going to go right. So you're not having all the negative thought, the doubt. And doubt, by the way, as with lying, is something we learn off adults as children. Your natural state is not to doubt. It's not to lie. But the child will then climb the tree and probably be very successful at it, because it's confident, because it's not very nervous, and it's not frightened. So by the analogy of climbing the tree, I show that as adults, basically, we can be disabled. I say the prisons we all live in are created by the mind. As adults, our thought patterns can determine our lives and cripple us.
Yeah. This is, we mentioned the Happy Naked Ape program before. It's like a mentoring program, and one-to-one, but building up into courses and things for like group workshops and things like this. But it's getting people to come out and climb trees with me, move barefoot, interact as a group, bit of play fighting in there, but all of these things to try and get them out of their modern urban mindset and rewild them.
Rewild them, I like that. If you want to rewire yourself, rewild.
So it's like, I think the tagline I say is rewilding the domesticated urban ape. Because
does that, what you're talking about now, does that encompass the Mankind Project and the New Warrior training?
Training, yeah. Okay, so the Mankind Project answered my call. After my divorce, my ego was shattered. My expectations of life were on the floor, and I was in pieces, and I was on a therapeutic journey. I started acting out. I had issues around substance abuse, some less helpful, some more helpful.
There's nobody who ever watches this show that doesn't know that I've taken lots of drugs.
Well, yeah,
I know it's part of my journey. So.
It's out there, and some drugs take you away from yourself. Some drugs throw you right into the middle of yourself, and so I gravitated towards the psychedelic drugs, and that was part of my healing journey. But the Mankind Project was there, and it answered the call. It's an organization run by men for men, to help men find like an empowered purpose in their life. Right now, I don't feel like life has any inherent purpose. It's an emergent phenomena, and it continues, it replicates. But we've got to the point now where like we're in this incredibly sophisticated biobot, and we function better when we're in a tight-knit community with a defined purpose. Like this like it makes us happy. It makes us feel like, wow, okay, we're going somewhere together. And this organization kind of gets men together in large groups, takes them through some well-defined kind of emotional processes using Jungian psychology, exploring the relationship between our conscious and unconscious. And it was one of the most powerful experiences in my life. Like the new warrior training program, there's 3 or 4 every year in this country, and if you're having any sort of lack of motivation, if you don't quite know what's going on with your life, if you're struggling with your emotions, if you're struggling to keep it together,
which is basically all of us,
it's like, get on it, because it exposed me to a really inspiring community of men. And up to that point in my life, I'd not really connected with my masculinity. I'd kind of felt like men are this kind of evil kind of group of people that go around abusing women, and it's like I'll put my hand up and say I'm a feminist. I'm there with the Me Too movement. I know, like, I don't know if any of my girlfriends ever have not been abused by men and taken advantage of, and that was one of the things that, like, I felt is horrific. And there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity right now, and it's like men have lots of abhorrent behaviors when we don't control those animal passions like that we've got from that bonobo history, where no one likes to be caged and put in a box, and we act out horrendously. But the Mankind Project was an answer to that toxic masculinity, and it allowed me to meet men that inspired me, and it kind of helped me feel like it's okay I'm okay being a man, and I found a way to express that masculinity in a healthy way that was powerful, that where I could move away from victimhood, but without becoming like a controlling, aggressive monster. So it's they look at the 4 archetypes: the lover, the warrior, the magician, the king. I'd say if you've got any doubts about where your life's going, get on that course. There's one coming up. Right. We're just past the April one. I think there's another one in June, July. But that organisation made such a difference in my life. I can't just pull a smile, is it?
That's what makes it well, that's good. That's a really nice quality, actually. You can't manufacture something. That's how you just express yourself. So talk again. Go again, Ben.
Morning, Mike. McBride. Patrick. Midnight. Midnight. McBride. Not. Yeah. Midnight. Where did Mike come from? Just for the record, though, I don't think you're not bad. I think you're a lovely man.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. And I think you're a lovely man too.
Oh, thank you. We can jerk each other off later.
Push for time. Oh, dear.
One for the outtakes, huh?
I don't know. Yeah.
What is it about trees? Grey pillars stretching up towards the sky. I imagine most kids climb trees. And I never stopped. Why did I never stop? Some trees do amazing things. Beech trees especially. They're so tall, so graceful, with huge vaulted arches. They're the cathedrals of the tree world. When I encountered rock climbing, I encountered people who were very physically orientated, very kinetic in the same way. But they were in these well-defined structures. There was grades, there was techniques, there was well-established routines, and I was a bit bewildered by all the gear, all the culture, and sometimes all the bullshit that's attached to that. But at the same time, interacting with rock climbers and seeing the way they train, it was inspiring, and certainly I took that discipline back into the tree. There's something very zen about the balance. I'm confused about the abundance of vertical environment that is ignored. People climb buildings, people climb ice, they climb rock, they climb turf, but no one's climbing trees, apart from to cut them down. Try it. You'll be amazed what you find up there. I feel the need to climb, to feel healthy, to feel whole. Give me three-dimensional freedom. Just me and the tree. Just there. I'm not up there. I'm not down there. Just there. In the reliance of my own hands.